Good morning, Redeemers. How are you? Anyway, with that, would you stand with me and open your Bibles to Luke 10:38? As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." This is the reading of the Lord. Thank you.
You guys ready for the word? Good. Me too. Man, we kicked off for the series last week with our Vision Sunday. How many of you were here? How many of you got some tacos because you actually signed up? How many are you going to follow through with that sign up, not just for the tacos? All right. That's good. Hey, man, but you know what I was excited about? We had an amazing turnout last week. I would say it was actually our biggest engagement that we've had since I've been here. So for that, thank you. Give you guys yourselves a hand, man. Some of the stuff I'm super proud about is not only did we have 136 signups, which is over a third of our church, getting engaged in groups and service, but we are actually ahead on serving. Doesn't mean we don't need you. We still got things we need filled, but we are doing well in the service department, which is always hard. People signing up to serve, and you guys responded, and you got it, and I appreciate that. And for those who didn't get it, hey, you're running late. Everybody else is ahead of you, so get on it. But man, I was so blessed to see the engagement and the passion to respond. We started our series Lead, and that's something we're going to be walking through is for the foreseeable future. This is our way, our leadership pipeline of how you grow at Redeemers. And so what we introduced this last week, and the LEAD acronym is this. It's a 4-step process that we hope everybody will grow and be able to see as they grow here at Redeemers. And the step 1 is learn God's mission. What this means is you begin to engage with God at a level of learning how to pray, learning His Word, that you start dealing with that stuff that is preventing you in your faith or hindering you in your faith or hindering you in the way you serve God or love God. You know, if you have doubts, if you have struggles, whatever that might be, you begin to address those things. You begin to hear from God. What does He desire of you? What is He trying to do in you to lead you in His mission? Because when He created the world and after the fall, He has had a mission for mankind. It's to live out what He has made you for so that people will come to know that He is God. And then through Jesus, that salvation is through Jesus, but that they will see it through what God is doing in your life. So there is a mission we're on, and our first step is to engage, is to learn from Him as our teacher. What does that look like? What would you have me do? What have you created me for? And to go and then live it out. And that leads us to step 2, which is engage the mission. This means you just start getting your feet wet. You know, the disciples first sat and learned from Jesus, and then they begin to see Him do miracles and serve and feed the hungry and serve the poor, and they engaged with that. And you begin to serve, and you join others in serving. You become part of a community that serves and loves others. So we talked about, you know, the first step is our saying at Redeemers is if you want God to change you, you gotta, come on, if you want God to change you, you gotta talk in service. And I'm just kidding. But number 2, we talked about last week, is the metaphor of the tree is that if you're not producing fruit out of what God is doing within you, then if you ain't growing, yeah, you guys are doing good. If you ain't growing, you're dying. You know, there's something fundamentally wrong at the root if there is not fruit being produced, because that's what we were made for, to produce good fruit, right? And so the third stage of that is to advance the mission. It's to come to this place, you know, that word advance in its etymology actually comes from this idea of an army. Like, it's to start leading others in God's mission. It's to take that responsibility of discipleship and say, God's been doing a great work in me, and now it is my time to help others do that, to disciple others, to help them grow in the way that God is working through you. And you can do that in a lot of ways, which we'll continue to talk about. And then the last one is to drive the mission, where God says, hey, I have specifically formed you with gifts and with a passion, with a hunger for a specific people or a ministry, and you begin to take on where God would have you minister as a focus area, whether it be in children's ministry or disabilities ministry or whatever it might be. Maybe it's beyond this church, great, but that God is cultivating you to take your story and your giftings and to go lead others towards a vision of how you will minister to somebody specifically, a specific group of people. So that is our 4-stage process that I'm super excited about. But today we start with a focus on the first one. And I will say over and over again that if we don't get step 1 right, none of the rest matters. Okay? If we don't get step 1 right, then none of what we talk about, none of what we do is going to matter. And that's why this one is, for me, it's becoming more and more serious and more important to continue to talk about. See, before we can ever begin to lead others, we must first sit at the feet of Jesus. Before we can ever learn to lead others, before we can ever do and accomplish and to grow and to change and be transformed, the first step is to stop stepping. The first step is to stop and to sit at the feet of Jesus. A follower of Jesus sits at his feet. They learn from him. They observe him. They are present with him. See, as we look at our text today, this is a famous story, and I'm not kidding. I've taught on a lot of things, sexuality, money. I've said a lot of things that make people upset. This verse, I'm starting to learn, gets under people's skin, this chapter, more than almost anything I've ever taught. And it's like, it's really interesting. It upsets people. And I'm not going to say who, but I was sitting with a certain group of people who do ministry at church. And we shared this story, and the visceral reaction of, well, who's going to cook the dinner if you're just sitting at his feet? And I remembered all these flashbacks of my mom saying that growing up, and I just sat there, and then I had conversations during the week with others, and then I had them yesterday with others, and I realized people hate this verse. That it wasn't my mom, it's us. We hate it, this idea that you should be merry, because everybody's response is, well, who's going to eat then? How are they going to eat the food? And I realized, man, this causes a reaction in us. And when you see that many people having that strong of a reaction to something, you know something culturally is going on. There's something culturally fundamentally wrong with us if we respond with an instant angry reaction. Or there's even people who go, yes, I know, it's just so hard, whatever the response is, we have a response to this text, and it's just about somebody cooking dinner and somebody sitting down. And yet we respond with, well, somebody's got to, you're not going to, it's like black and white for everybody. You either sit with Jesus or you do something good. It is so ridiculous. And that's not the point of this text. But you see Martha sitting there, and really what's going on is she's looking, saying, look at all this stuff I'm doing. Mary's just sitting there. She's lazy. Tell her to help me. She ain't doing what I'm doing. And so, but I invite you today to not see this so black and white. Like you either do good for others or you love Jesus. It sounds ridiculous, but that's our response. How do I have time to do that, to be merry if I'm going to serve and if I'm going to work? As if that's the only options. It's really, see, this text is not about one or the other. It's really about what is prioritized and how much attention and value do we place on other things and other details beyond and before Jesus? What do we give our attention to and that we're not willing to give to Christ? See, there will always be, on every one of us, none of you are called to sit forever. All right? So that's not the point. Every one of us has a calling on our lives to go produce fruit. You'll hear me talk about it all the time. You will all be called to some level to step up and serve others and disciple others as you grow in your faith. But what do we do first is really the concern of this text and what we're talking about. What do we do first? What is the reason we do the works that we do? What is the reason we serve? What is the reason I go to work and make money? Where do we have our hearts? Where do we have our minds and our devotion? Like, that's what's at the heart of this text. What is my motive? You know, at the end of the day, most of us at our core as a human, our motives are not naturally pure. They're almost always self-centered to some degree, even when we're cooking dinner. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But the bigger question here is, am I serving out of a genuine love for God? Am I doing? Am I creating and producing out of a genuine love for God, or out of a heart that wants to impress others or prove my worth in what I do and produce? See, to serve God's mission correctly, we must first learn God's mission. We have to learn from the master, learn from the teacher what he would have us be, what he desires of us. And a way a disciple truly learns is to sit at his feet. And today we're going to look at all the ways, what does it mean to sit at Christ's feet? What does it mean to sit there? So let's look at the first one. To sit at his feet is to be focused on God. It's learning to prioritize our worship. Again, I'm going to go through 4 things. It's going to be an acronym for feet because it's so cool. I love acronyms. I actually hate them, but this one worked. It was like natural, so I'm like, all right, I'll go with it. But this one is the most important. Nothing else matters after this if you don't do this one first. It's to be focused on God. It's learning to prioritize our worship. Now, worship is not what you just did here. That is a form of it. Worship is, what do I give myself to, lay it all down for, because I believe it's going to imbue me with worth. That I believe this thing has so much worth that I give myself to it, that I submit myself to it. It's to worship is a daily act, and we do it all the time. You don't have to be a fervent God follower. You are worshiping something. Okay? There is something you worship that you say, oh, if I just give you more of myself, you're going to fulfill my needs. You're going to be worth it. We all got that thing. We are worshipers. But the thing is about us as people, and I believe it's worse today than it's ever been in the history of mankind. We are distracted creatures. We are so easily distracted. We are the doc squirrel. You know, like the moment you start to love something and pay attention to it, you just get sidetracked instantly. We're so easily distracted. And what the Bible teaches us about the nature of humans is that we are so easily distracted by things that offer us meaning and worth and purpose, and we just jump from them from place to place. We gravitate to all types of things that we believe will make us feel successful and important. And so perhaps for Martha, the service was not a bad thing. Martha was not doing anything wrong. In fact, the Bible talks a lot about hospitality, and that's not just shaking somebody's hand at the door. It's welcoming in the stranger. It's feeding people you barely know. It's allowing weird people to walk through your doors and being like, I'm going to love you and take care of you. And sometimes they would stay for a week or 2 on end. My kids have been doing that for years. They never leave. That hospitality is awesome. It is a calling of God. So what is the issue? Martha's doing what she's supposed to do. But maybe Martha wasn't doing it because Jesus was honored by her doing of it, but because she's looking to appease a need for affirmation or a feeling of importance or control. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's conjecture. But for many of us, we work to produce something to make us feel good. Something that will make us feel good enough. We gravitate to all types of things that will maintain an image that we are worthy. So we are running ourselves ragged because we are focused on so many other things. We are focusing on 100 things, trying to prove that we are good enough, produce enough, that we are smart, that we are successful, have meaning, that people can look up to us, whatever it might be. But we're doing it not because Jesus is guiding us in it, but because we're trying to get from it only that which we can get from God. And that's what Jesus really says to Martha. It's not an issue of preparing a meal. Yes, you need to eat, Martha. Yes, they need to eat. All right? Don't go black and white on me here. Yes, you need to eat food. But the thing is, it's like you're going to eat, but are you first there for the right reasons? You know, it may not be as good as you had planned. Maybe you didn't have the right napkins with the right colors. But you sat at the feet of Jesus. You know, my wife's cooking may not be that great, but she sits with me all the time, and I love that. It is more important, thank you. Just kidding. It's wonderful. You guys, come on. Relax. It's cooking. Now, she's, you know, but it's about the person, right? What did you say? Oh. It's not the issue of preparing a meal. This is what Jesus says to her. And I like the NLT version in Luke 10. He says, you are worried and upset over all of these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. It doesn't mean that these other things don't need to get done or you don't need to work. There is only one thing that deserves that type of attention. You know, how many of you have done a renovation on your home? Anything, like your kitchens especially. How many hours did you spend picking out granite? Do you understand that's a piece of rock that you're going to eat and drool over and have to clean each day? And you will spend hours trying to, is this the right color? I don't know, there's a speck of red in it. That's not my mom, I swear. But we do that, like we will obsess. We will visit 5 stores trying to find the right gray. It's a rock. And Jesus is saying, you're concerned about every color and tidbit of information of how it's going to look, but are you really, the only thing that matters is that you're eating with me. Right? I don't care about the granite. Pick some rock and put it there. Pick a boulder. We'll eat on it. But the words he uses here is like, why are you so anxious over all this? Why do you consume yourself with the details of it all? You know how many people, like you got your napkins perfect and they come in and they just, like nobody cares. My mom once told me, she's like, are you going to ask for china for your wedding? And I'm like, why? Why am I going to buy $100 plates that nobody's going to use for presentation? And I'm like, if anybody walks into my house and goes, that's your china, we're not going to be friends very long. Like nobody who cares about that is going to like me. What? Why do we get anxious? Why do we get anxious about these things in our lives, these things, these details? Because we believe that these things are so important that if I don't do it, I have failed, or I will be seen as insufficient, or somebody will not love or appreciate my work. See, that's us. We get discombobulated trying to keep up with so many things. How many of you just are like trying to keep pace with all the stuff you got to do in life, and it just feels like you're constantly behind? Just constantly like, I can't keep up with all the sports and the meetings and the events and the money and I can't keep up with it all. See, it's not that you don't need to serve or live or give or manage your life. What this means is that we don't do them, is that if we aren't first sitting with Christ, like if that's not your priority in the day, you're not going to do them in God-honoring ways. You're not going to do them with the right motives. Like if you were really willing to sit and dig at why I care about these things, it's not going to be with good motives. You're going to justify it like it's to take care of my family. Your family wants you. Not your napkins, not your housing, not your kitchen that looks awesome. They want you. Your kids will never grow up and go, my parents picked the best granite. Never. But you know what they will say? We never ate together. And the kids that ate with their families, they'll be weird. Since I made a lot of jokes, I'll say we ate together, and we practice that in our family, and it's a simple act of presence. You're going to come home, and we're going to eat together almost every night. We're going to be in the presence. And you know what? There's actually crazy stats on this, on the impact on kids, and the kids who are more accountable and stay healthier tend to have face-to-face contact with dad and mom each day. So I make sure they look at me. What'd you do today? I smell you. You know, like, they got to know, they got to face me. They're not going to care about the granite. To sit at his feet means to stop everything else. It's to prioritize your faith and love of God first. It's to shut out the noise, like it's to stop. It's to bring yourself low and to be one-minded, single-minded here with God. Like guys, it takes so much work. How many of you have a quiet time once a week? I'll just be generous so you can raise your hand. Once a week. How hard is it to stop and block out all the text and the things you got to do? Like it is a work to go just me and you. What do you want to say to me? Like it, and then in 5 minutes you're like, you're on to something else. Like when you really try to do it, it is so difficult. It is a discipline that we have to practice and learn to get down to the feet of Jesus and go, I just want you. And to block out the noise and the distractions. It's to say, this is what I'm most concerned with. And he is honored by your willingness to try to block it all out. Just to be with him. And you ask him, what would you have me do? I'm about to start my day. What would you have me do? What do you want to show me today that's in me? Where do you want to lead me? How many of you don't have to answer because I know the answer. How many of you are actually starting your day going, what would you have me do today? What am I working for? What do you want? Not is it good? Martha did something good. It just wasn't about God. She didn't ask that question, what does Jesus want in my house? She just assumed it. You see, when we sit at his feet, when we are willing to stop and turn our ears and our hearts on Jesus, that is when we'll begin to fall in love with him. That's when you begin to fall in love. That which you turn your attention to is what you'll love. Mary sat at his feet not because she was lazy, but because she was in love. That's why she stopped and just wanted to be in his presence like that. See, she realized that this is the one thing that mattered. The rest of the stuff will come, but he has my heart and he has my ears because I'm in love. When we learn to sit at his feet and focus on him, God will sweep you off your feet. He'll lighten the load. He will pick you up. He will encourage you. He will strengthen you. He will make you experience his love, but you got to be still. You got to listen intently like he matters that much. One of the things I always tell my kids is listening is the number one way you can show people how you care. Number one, do you listen? That shows that I have your heart, your attention, your care, your concern. When we choose to do this, then the rest of these things that I'm going to talk about today, they all follow from it. But it starts here. And I got to tell you, search your gut and your soul and your natural reaction to stop each day and make your day about this. Like, sit at his feet before you do. And is your natural reaction, well, who's going to get my job done then? You got a problem. I'm not judging you. I got a problem. But it's time we acknowledge that. If your natural reaction is, well, other people don't do that. I do all this stuff. You got a problem. The question isn't what other people do or how much you're going to produce. It's, do you love him that much to stop? To make him part of your priority of the day, the priority of your day before everything else. And that's what we keep trying to push here at the church. Prioritize him. Put it first. Before kids' sports, before your work, before your income, before all that garbage that will take care of itself, he says, if you trust him, those things will come and take care of themselves. Worry about that later because they will take care of their own selves if you get this right. So if we do that, then there's a second piece of what it means to sit at the feet of Jesus. When you sit at the feet of Jesus, you will be encouraged in your struggles. That means learning to trust him and to heal. That is one of the benefits. See, it's not a task. It's not a religious thing I'm calling you to. It's what I'm telling you is when you start to listen to God, he lifts you up in ways that you need to hear. So I'm going to tell you a personal story, and it's going to sound weird, and maybe it's going to sound commonplace to you, but for me, it is so unusual. I am a doer. I am an achiever. I want to build and be better. I don't need to be the greatest. I just need to be better than the next guy. I'm an achiever. And I have been, for the last 3 or 4 months, finally making a habit of going, okay, what do you want? I think I've been leading too much in my own mind and power. And I've been sitting, and I've been listening to Jesus. And this might be weird to some of you, but I'm journaling. And I'm saying, I want to sense what you're saying to me. And so I'm writing words. And if you know me, I am weirded out by this stuff. Like, I don't like this stuff. It seems hyper-spiritual. But I've been listening and just going, okay, what are you saying to me? And you want to know some of the stuff he says to me in that quiet, in that private time where I can finally get my focus on him and start my day? I've been waking up at 5:30 and going, what do you want to say to me before I get going? It has transformed my spiritual life. I'm not saying I got it all together, but it has transformed my spiritual life, that listening, not just reading. I read and then I go, what do you want to teach me today? And here's what's crazy. I don't do well with encouragement. I don't do well with people saying, Nick, I love you. I say, prove it. I tell people, Jesus says love is laying down your life. Prove it. Or with Michelle, she goes, I love you. I go, why? Have a reason. I want to have earned it. And that's a true story. It's funny, but it's a true story. Like, I want you to have a reason that I did something great to make you love me. So I don't do well with encouragement. When I hear cheesy sermons of, you guys, you're going to be lifted up today, I just, ugh. Like, I don't do well with it. When I sit privately with Jesus, you know what he says to me? I love you. Those are not my inner thoughts. That's not how I naturally work. I have been lifted up to hear that I am worthy and good enough as I am, and I don't respond well to that naturally. And so I know God is doing something at those moments because I am hearing words that I need to hear that I don't receive well because it's not natural. Maybe some of you will love that stuff, reading Jesus Calling and all that. I can't handle it. And yet when I'm alone with God, he's like, I love you. You are who I created you to be. Stay with me. Like, it's just words of encouragement. It's so special. When you sit at the feet of Jesus, when you're quiet, when you're prioritized, he lifts you up. I don't know when you're going through hardships, he reminds you of what matters. He reminds you that you're loved beyond what anybody is saying about you. When you're going through pain or loss, he reminds you that there is a reason and purpose, and he's going to put his arms around you. He encourages you. He helps you heal. But if you're not listening for him, you may not ever get that. In Matthew 11, he says, "Come and learn from me, and I will give you rest." In Matthew 15, it tells us that great crowds came to him, and they were bringing the lame and the blind and the crippled and the mute and many others, and they laid them at his feet, and he healed them. People came and laid themselves at their feet, and his first response is to heal them. He then gave them the gospel. Trust me, that's next. He then called out their sin, and that's next sometimes. But he says, first, you lay yourself down here, and I'm going to heal you. I'm going to help you find healing. I'm going to help you find that you can trust me. He says, come to me, and I will give you rest for your weary souls. Anybody feel weary? Anybody feel like you're just running and running and running and you're tired? Amen. That's the age of anxiety we live in. And he says, come to me, sit down at my feet, focus on me, carry my yoke, my burden, and it won't be like a burden. It will be an easy yoke. It'll be lightened. You will feel freer. When we come to the feet of Jesus, he helps us to get up on our feet. He helps bring healing and rest to your weary bones. And most of us will go, I just don't have time for that. You're going to have a lot of time when you have a heart attack. Anxiety like I've had. Leaving you in hospitals. You don't have time not to do it. Another thing that happens when we make Christ a priority and sit at his feet is that we submit ourselves to be examined in our hearts. Learning to confront our sinfulness. This is uncomfortable. Nobody likes this. We do everything we can to not look at what's wrong with me. I already feel bad enough. You know, we stay busy. You know why most of us are Marthas? Is so I don't have to think about stuff. As long as I keep doing, I don't have to listen to that inner voice that goes, are you sure you're enough? As long as I keep producing and winning and succeeding, you know, I don't have to think about the fact that I feel empty inside or that I don't feel like I have loved ones around me that really care about me or whatever it might be, or the anger that has been bubbling inside of me. Like, I don't have to sit there and think about those things. Just stay busy. Or the despair I felt, if I can just keep moving. Right? When I willingly, I bet this is why most of us don't like to be alone with Christ and be quiet. The reason we don't like to be quiet is because we have thoughts. If I can keep busy, I don't got to think. Because when I think, I start remembering things. I start feeling things. I start hearing things about my own struggles and my insecurities. When we willingly sit at the feet of Jesus, when we're like, I'm going to block everything out and I'm going to listen, you know, there's going to be things. Yes, Jesus encourages me, but that's not all he does. I can't tell you how many things he's revealing in my heart in those morning sessions. In those times with God where he goes, dude, why are you doing this? Like, what is your motive behind that? This is a true story. One of the things I felt like God was saying to me one day was, I want you to go contact the pastors in the city of Reedley. I don't want to do that. But I heard it. So I did it. Then I forgot to respond to their email back. But I'm still working on it. But he told me that. It's not something I want to do. But the idea was, why are you so resistant? I had to examine stuff going on in me. See, God will have you examine the stuff in you if you sit there, and I know that doesn't sound fun. But if you have a hope of not being hindered in your faith, if you have a hope of being healthy in your relationships, if you have a hope of really finding peace in God, you have to allow him to address the stuff that can keep screwing you up. Right? Like, we don't want to deal with it, but that thing you're not dealing with is the thing that keeps tripping you up for the rest of your life. The thing that you're not dealing with is the reason you have anxiety. The thing you're not dealing with in your sinfulness is the reason your marriages keep messing up. It's the stuff I don't want examined that I need Christ to bring to the surface and wipe away. And the only way I can do that is to sit there and listen and allow him to excavate that stuff in me. See, there's another scenario just like Mary's where a woman who may have even been a prostitute, but she was a sinner of some sort, comes and sits at his feet, and she cries at his feet, and she pours this expensive perfume. He doesn't sit there and say, everything's normal, there's nothing wrong with her. He calls it out. Yeah, she's a sinner. And then he loves her, and then he leads her to salvation. But he loves her. It's out of that love that he says, yeah, you've got sin and brokenness, and I'm here to, he says, you are forgiven. And people are like, who are you to forgive people? But he goes, your sins are forgiven. He doesn't leave the sins unaddressed, but he addresses them because he loves you. Not because he wants you feeling shamed all the time. He loves you, and if you don't get rid of that stuff, you're going to be suffering from the rest of your life. You're going to be distant from God and distant from others and messing up those things that he has meant for you. Until you allow the darkness within you. Are you willing to sit quietly and hear, man, there's some darkness. We're afraid of our own darkness. Some of us are acting super religious because we don't want to acknowledge that there's something deeply wrong within me. And so when he addresses Martha, he's not addressing hospitality. That's not the issue. He's not saying, why are you cooking food? He's saying, Martha, what is at your heart here that you think that is so important that you're better than Mary, that you don't have time for me? What are you doing this for? And there's the darkness. Maybe I'm doing this to be better than others. So people go, look how great they are. Maybe I'm producing so others praise me because I need my self-worth stroked. Maybe I'm doing it to manipulate people. Do you know how much I did for you? So I can use it against you the rest of your life. I don't know, but it reveals your darkness. And so when we sit at the feet of Jesus, he puts our feet to the fire. He puts our feet to the fire. He says it's time to get up and deal with that stuff. And if I can stay busy, I never have to hear that. It's time for you to lay it all down, to confess your sins, to allow me to get rid of that, not because you are shameful, but because, man, you are messed up and I want to love you. I want to be with you. And you're like clinging to these behaviors and this darkness. Like, he's not shocked by your darkness. Why are you? Bring it to the surface and let him deal with it. Lastly, when we have focused our love and attention on him, he has lifted us up and examined our garbage and begun the work of scraping it away in us. And then he is equally training us to carry out his mission to others. So he encourages you. He excavates that darkness to deal with those things that are going to trip you up down the road in your faith and in your life and in your relationships. And then he's training you in righteousness, learning to love and lead others like Jesus. He is developing you. When the disciples came, he first dealt with their sin. He then also dealt with their affections and their loves, and he taught them. He taught them about the kingdom of God, and they sat and they gathered. He taught them how to pray. He taught them the ways of the kingdom. He encouraged them. He built them up. He got rid of the garbage. He taught them what it was like to live like God, and then he trained them in righteousness. If you are a group of people, here's what your community will look like compared to the rest of the world. If you love me, here's how you'll love others. If you love me, here's how you'll love the poor, the immigrant, the orphan, the widow. Like, if you love me, here's how it will look played out in your life. Now go do it. He trained them in righteousness and right living. And then he sent them out. He teaches us to follow in his footsteps. He showed them how. When we reflect on the life of Jesus, we go, what would you have me do the way you did it? What is important to you so I can do that? Not what do I think isn't good and important. I think so often we were taught that we come to Jesus Christ so that we can be saved. No, you are saved because you know Jesus Christ. It is only by his free grace that you find salvation, not by any works so that no one can boast. But that is not why you love Jesus. That is the byproduct of knowing Christ is your salvation. But he has raised you up to be in his presence and to carry out his mission to the world, because once you're saved, there's a million people who aren't around you. Like he has created you to produce good fruit. The end goal isn't getting out of hell. It's to live a fruitful, amazing, just awesome life because you are in so communion with the Spirit of God. And that you live for the sake of others, that they would see the kingdom lived out through you. It is not a get out of hell free card, though that is true. Here's what 2 Timothy teaches us, that the Word of God is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that, say so that, this is why it's there, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. Why is it training you? Why is it dealing with your sin? Why is it rebuking that darkness in you? Why is it correcting the things that are off in your life? So that you may be equipped, thoroughly equipped for every good work. Why do we come to hear from him and learn from him? It's to be equipped so that you will serve God with your life and not get tripped up by sin and brokenness. He sent them out. We come to the feet of Jesus to learn to love God with all of our heart, and then to be sent out to love others like that. We don't just come to God to be saved. We don't just come to church to be encouraged. You're in the wrong church for that one. I hope you're encouraged. But that's not why you were here. We encourage, we strengthen, we address sin, we talk about the garbage so that we are equipped to see what God would have for you in each and every one of your lives, in your families, and in the places you work. What does he want to do through you? In Romans, Paul tells us that God blesses the feet of those he sends. He blesses the feet he sends. If God is training you and you are listening to him, he promises to bless you and work through you by the power of his Spirit in you. He blesses the feet in which he sends. You know what it doesn't say? He blesses the butts who sit in church. He blesses the arms that are crossed right now, resistant. He blesses the eye roll. Here he goes again. He blesses the feet he sends. If you're coming to the church to get your blessing, get sent. Live out your faith. Go sit at his feet. Listen to him. Let him excavate your sin. That's not going to seem like a blessing, but it is the biggest one you can deal with. Let him deal with it. Send. Be sent. But lest we become like Martha, trying to find our worth by what we accomplish, we must not just jump on to working for God if we aren't first sitting with him. We must first learn God's mission by sitting at his feet. And apparently, after all these conversations I've had over the last week and thinking about, historically listening about this text about Martha and Mary, I realized, man, there's a lot of hard things we can talk about that don't get people riled up the way this does. Why are we so resistant to say no to things in our life, to say yes to sitting with Christ each day? Why are we so resistant to waking up to be with Jesus before I work? Why is it, it's just so hard. I get to bed late on Netflix. I'm not a morning person. Why is it such a guttural reaction to, why? Somebody's got to eat. Somebody's got to serve. Because it strikes at the core. If I stop, I'm going to hear things from him that tell me, you're not all right. Not that I don't love you. I love you. I love you. And this is not all right. It's not working for you. You're going to examine your relationships and go, I've been ignoring this. I've been ignoring how I'm treating somebody. I've been acting in anger towards all these people that I'm supposed to love. You're going to hear it. You're going to see it. If I stop and listen, you might be less productive. You might not end up being Martha Stewart. You might be serving some KFC to Jesus because you took the time to be Mary first. And some of you clenching, not in my house. But yeah. Sometimes the product isn't the way you intended it, but it's honoring to God more so because you spent time with him first. Our saying here is get uncomfortable. And what that means is I'm going to step out in faith to begin to first sit out of the feet of Jesus. See, we can sit here and jump to, and this does mean, when I say get uncomfortable, it means, yes, go serve people that you're uncomfortable serving. It means, yes, take risks and leaps of faith where you go, man, I don't know if I'm good at this. That's great. God will stretch you and he'll change you. But what I am discovering one of the most uncomfortable things you and I can do is sit quietly and say, God, talk to me. God, show me. God, help me see. God, it is so uncomfortable to say no to more money so I can say yes to God. Oh, it is so uncomfortable to say I'm going to have a talk with my spouse that I've been needing to have for years. And God is revealing those things in me. It is so uncomfortable to be quiet and to wake up and be with him. And so when I say get uncomfortable, it also means the hardest one may be just stopping and stop doing and stop succeeding and stop being all about that life that you've been taught to be about and just be still and listen and journal and listen for God's words into your life to make him priority. So as I close here, there are things that we have launched this semester that are part and parcel of what we do here at Redeemers, and we want everybody to address it. First one is margin. If you say, I don't have time to sit at his feet, margin is for you. That helps us learn God's mission. It helps us make space for that. It helps us to say, how do I prioritize God with my finances, with my work, with my time, with my calendar, with my family? How do I prioritize God? And that needs to be, if you can't do that, really can't, then you need to be involved in addressing that. The second one is we are launching life groups. And this is something people don't usually go and sign up for. This is the least likely to be signed up for amongst our congregation because it's uncomfortable. You sit with people. But you know what it does? It does all the things we're talking about. You're going to stop and be with others who are going to keep you accountable, who are going to encourage you, who are going to challenge you, who are going to continue to process what you heard in the service to say, what is God doing in you? You're going to have to ask those questions. You're going to pray together. And most of us go, I don't want to. Go do it. Because we must first say, I need to prioritize the community of faith and my time focused on God so that I can grow. Thirdly, we're offering Rooted. Rooted is what we've been doing in microgroups for a couple years now. Rooted does everything we're talking about. It first teaches you about God. It first teaches you how to connect and pray to God and get to know him. It then goes into your dark stuff and says, let's deal with your strongholds in the past and the brokenness that you walk through so that we can get you free. It then encourages you and teaches you how to love God and love others. It then addresses issues with money and service and mission. And it prepares you and trains you to start thinking about, God has made me for a purpose. It does everything we've talked about. And it's to say, I am going to be committed and walk through these things to train me for righteousness, to prepare me for the road. And if you've done Rooted, we're offering RLI, which is our Redeemers Leadership Intensive. And this is the same thing. We're going to take you through EHL, Emotionally Healthy Leadership, and it's going to do the same thing. How are you intimate with God? Are you learning how to be intimate with God before you lead? Are you learning to address the darkness within you before you lead? Because that darkness is, if you're a leader and you don't address that garbage, it's going to come out in amazing ways. It's going to put more pressure on it. So you address that first. And then it trains you. The goal is to train you and prepare you for the works of ministry, to be equipped for every good work. And we're inviting people to apply and be a part of that. Lastly, this is not offered this semester, but EHS is a big core to our church, emotionally healthy spirituality, or for men, getting good. We'll call it whatever you want, but so it doesn't sound sissy. But everybody needs it. It's about addressing that stuff, being examined in your heart. It's about being taught how to be close to Jesus and quiet, and things that many of us as men, we were not taught to be. We were taught to brush this emotional garbage off. And we're struggling because of it through our lives. We're struggling with God. We don't feel close to Him. We're not really great with relationships because we've been generation after generation being taught to not talk about it, not examine it, not feel about it. We're going to offer that in micro groups as a discipleship tool, and we're going to offer that also later in the fall for men and women. This is part and parcel. How do you begin addressing your stuff to just learn how to be quiet and close and near to God so that He is examining this stuff in your souls? Amen? You know what I'm excited about as we close here? If you'll stand with me, I'm going to pray us out. There's a lot of stuff what we're doing, but don't lose sight of what this whole message is about. I'm pretty sure if I ask the vast majority of you what your intimacy with God is like each day, you'd probably be like me a few months ago. Well, I get to it when I can. Well, I read for 5 minutes. I got verses sent to me. That's not towards anybody. It's just how we all are, man. Like, I read a quick thing. I didn't say, how's your reading? Say, what's your intimacy like with God? What's your time like? How are you listening for Him? How do you ask? If you're struggling with listening to Him, ask others. I'll work with you, because it's hard. It's hard to be quiet and hear from God. And I don't hear voices, just so nobody's worried about me. Not that charismatic. But I sense Him. And He said, and things that come across as I'm journaling, oh my gosh, they're just things Nick Jones, would not say. I just wouldn't. They're always what I don't want, and it's so good. It's so good, man. And I hope that that's what we produce, because if you first do this, the rest of it will find its way, man. You're going to be amazing businessmen and women. You first get this, you're going to be great bosses who represent Christ in your workplace. You get this, you're going to be great leaders in the church. You're going to be directors. See, we got the D back up because we're ready for directors. You're going to be great leaders in the kingdom if you get this right. If you're resistant right now, stop it. There's something fundamentally wrong with us that just doesn't want God, and the scriptures tell us that our hearts are naturally bent against Him. And with that, what I'm asking you and challenging you to, I know we ran late today. I don't care. This is the most important thing. I'll make the other one shorter to make up for it. Nothing else matters. Not what we produce at Redeemers, not what I do, not how I teach. Nothing else matters. If you can't stop and be like this with God and hear from Him, nothing that you do will matter. Because you will do it out of your own power like I do and screw it up. Nothing else matters but the intimacy with Christ. And if it's hard for you, I understand it is hard. You're not alone. That's most of us. Do it. Be persistent. Push aside your schedule to say, this is what matters. I'm going to harp on it until we are all just equipped to be in the presence of God and hearing from Him. Which means forever. Nothing else matters, my friends. If you get this right, all that other stuff will take care of itself, Martha. We're going to eat, but we're going to eat with the Lord. Amen? Lord God, I just pray that you send us today like it starts here. Not send us to work, that you send us to sit with you. Not send us to be lazy, but send us to make you our priority, to hear from you. Because I know that if we get this, Lord, that you will change hearts and minds in ways that will affect the rest of the world. God, I'm praying right now, Lord, that all I'm asking for us to give you, myself included, is our devotion and our hearts and our minds and our eyes and our ears. Lord, I'll pray that your Spirit is at work to begin transforming and breaking down those walls of resistance, that culture that says, do and you'll be worth something, do and you'll be worth something, do more and you'll be worth something. I pray against that, and I pray for you to just imbue this whole congregation with your worth. That our worth is found in our obedience and love for you. Not in our doing, but our doing comes. Lord God, I just pray right now that you will, for those who are disengaged, who don't have community, who are not feeling encouraged, who are not feeling examined, who are not addressing their garbage, Lord, that you will find the right place for them, the right people, that you are already bridging relationships of new faces in this congregation to find the right people who will help disciple them along with you. But God, most of all, I pray that we are obedient to listen each day. We love you. God, I hope you're honored by us, by this church body. I hope our lives and our daily lives and our time thinking about you are honored just by our casting our thoughts and our cares on you. Will that Spirit be at work in us now? Will it rest in us now and send us out? God, thank you that you bless the feet and that you send. May we sit at your feet. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.